Welcome to Total Retail Talks, your podcast channel for retail knowledge.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Total Retail Talks. I'm Joe Keenan, the editor-in-chief of Total Retail, and I'm pleased to be joined on today's episode by Lorenzo De Plano, who is the co-founder and CEO of ALP, which is a nicotine pouch brand that launched as a DTC brand, and it's quickly grown into a $1 billion plus brand with retail distribution, obviously direct to consumer, still part of that growth strategy. So we're going to talk to Lorenzo about the kind of origin story of ALP and a little bit about its growth trajectory as well. So Lorenzo, I'm excited to have you on, and welcome.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
So I gave a very, very quick intro to the audience about ALP, but for those that might not yet be familiar with the brand, can you give us a little bit of a background here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been an incredible journey and ride, but long story short, ALP is a nicotine pouch brand. For people who are not familiar with the category, nicotine pouches are effectively an alternative for people who use or want to use nicotine in a different type of form factor. It's more akin, to nicotine gum than anything else, I would say at this point in time. It's basically a small nicotine pouch that you put into your mouth and you use it and leave it in there for anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. And basically it gives you that nicotine satisfaction without having to smoke anything or, vape anything or anything like that. So it's just kind of a different growing alternative to what has conventionally basically been a combustible space, so to speak.
And I mentioned that you're the co-founder, so I'd love to learn a little bit about and CEO. But I want to kind of get back to a little bit about your background and kind of what led you to launch the business. Tell us a little bit about the early days of ALP.
Yeah, absolutely. So long story short, and I'll try to avoid being too myopic here, but I'd started several businesses, and one of the companies I started was actually one of the first vape manufacturing companies in the United States, this was back in 2014, 2015. It was myself and three others, and we had developed that brand, and we're kind of innovators in the category and the space, and we basically ended up selling that brand to a publicly traded company called Turning Point Brands in 2019. From there, I took over the New Ventures and Zigzag brand and developed those as part of Turning Point Brands, and had the privilege to kind of work on these great assets and also develop new products for that company. In the process, one of the things that really was the genesis for ALP is we'd started developing, a nicotine pouch portfolio over Turning Point Brands, and we were looking for different ways to expand that portfolio of products to new consumers and cast a wider net. Because one of the things that we'd seen is really, if you look back the last few hundred years, there hasn't really been a lot of innovation in nicotine consumption, right? People would smoke cigarettes, and there was basically no innovation there for as long as we know, basically. And the problem with cigarettes, as everybody knows, is they kill 50% of all long-term users, right? And in the United States alone, you have basically 400,000 or so people who die annually from smoking-related illnesses. And so it's a very, very problematic form factor to actually smoke those products. And so you had this innovation with vaping that came on the scene. And that was obviously, grabbing something that was combustible and converting it to an aerosol. So there's obviously a lot of debate as to how much healthier is vaping compared to smoking cigarettes. My own personal opinion is that it's substantially better, but it also has its own issues and isn't perfect. And so the question for us became, how do we innovate even more to make the form factor, more benign? And so ultimately what happened was at Turning Point Brands, we had developed a portfolio of nicotine pouch products. So effectively eliminating all combustion from the process entirely. And so the idea for us was, okay, we have these products. At the time, Zyn had recently entered the market in states like Colorado and whatnot, but had been, a well-established brand in the EU for some time before that. And the problem with their products that we identified was that they just lacked the moisture. They lacked that experience that consumers in more mature markets like in Scandinavia were really much more commonplace in those markets, right? So wet pouch technology was something that was much more commonplace in more mature markets. And so we identified that seam and we said, okay, that is going to be our focus. Fast forward, some time, and we ended up connecting with Tucker Carlson, who obviously is, a force of nature and an avid nicotine pouch user. And at the time, him and his partner, Neil Patel over at TCN, wanted to basically develop this new nicotine pouch brand for themselves. And so we ended up creating a JV between Turning Point Brands, public company, and TCN, Tucker Carlson Network. And basically, the JV was 50-50 owned by both companies, which then was also where the ideation that Genesis, the ALP brand, really came into be. So we launched the ALP brand in November 2024. Now I believe it is, yes, November 2024. And ever since then, it's been on an explosive growth trajectory. In the retail stores, we just recently launched in retail. Before we were predominantly online only. And in the stores that we have launched against, where we're competing with massive big tobacco companies with tens of billions of dollars in value and capabilities to deploy towards this category, we're already the fourth largest brand in the stores that we're currently in. And so it's been an incredible journey, and it's kind of an underdog tale, right? Because it was this very unassuming brand with like this motley crew of parties involved. And so it's just been a wild ride. And I think right now we're kind of in, I'd say, the third inning of the game, and it's looking pretty good. So
Yeah, and I want to talk about kind of at least the initial distribution strategy. So for most CPG brands, they're looking to prioritize retail distribution first, and then building that consumer awareness comes next. And ALP kind of really took a different approach, and it wanted to prove demand through its D2C model first, and then secondarily go into physical brick and mortar through convenience stores. Tell us a little bit about the decision to take that approach and kind of D2C first and then retail.
yeah, I mean, look, the reality is our team has a lot of experience with both the retail side, but also with the D2C side. But what we really love about D2C is it acts as an incredible sandbox where you get to test, different strategies out, different, marketing approaches. You get to really A/B test things in real time and get very mission critical data points that you can then deploy in a broader national campaign when it comes to marketing. And so it's this fantastic ecosystem where you can engage with customers, you have their information, you can reach out to them, you can say, hey, what do you like? What do you not like? And I think, for us, we're really proud and focused on the customer experience, because we believe like our customers, we have the largest social media brand right now of any nicotine pouch company in the world. And largely that has been an organic process, developing that and growing that. And what's been I would say at the nexus of all this is building that sense of community, right? The consumers that are our ALP users, are at the forefront of our product development process, our ideation process. And so using them as part of that process is always really critical. So yeah, I think that's what we view it as, is this ideal sandbox through which to basically, test things out and see what's working. And then as we scale up into the retail experience and building that out, we now have kind of the playbook that we want to use at scale.
That's actually a perfect segue into I wanted to follow up with Lorenzo in terms of, as you quickly grew the brand in becoming the leading D2C brand in the nicotine pouch category, it also yielded you some, I imagine, very valuable, rich first party customer data and insights in kind of that D2C market. How can you talk about how you're using those insights and that data to help kind of lay the groundwork for that retail distribution model and kind of convincing your retail partners that ALP can drive incremental category growth for them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think really for us, looking at the D2C business, it allows us to identify areas of the country that are asking for outlet retail, right? I mean, we have, an insane amount of customer data, and we're asked questions from our customers all the time. One of the biggest questions we're asked is, "Hey, I'd like to be able to get this in person, and there's a location you're buying me that doesn't have it. What can we do there?" Right. And so, one of the things we've started to recently do is actually telling our customers, "Hey, let us know if there are places where you want us to bring out, right? Let us know if there's a store that you want us to carry out, because that helps us drive our sales strategy." And then as we work with retailers, we can say, "Look, these are the inquiries we're getting. We've gotten X number of thousand inquiries in this zip code, and we think this is an underserviced area and presents a really great opportunity for you guys." And so it's that real-time data that allows us to create that value and to extract that value from the D2C business. And I also just think it's the healthiest way to launch a CPG business in the modern day.
Yeah, proving out that demand as well for the retail partners that you're going to work with. It makes it a lot easier for them to understand the value that ALP can bring to their business as well. I want to talk about, so ALP is operating in this highly regulated category, right? It's competitive. You mentioned Zyn and some others that are in the market as well. Yet you've grown out really with relatively little marketing spend. Talk a little bit about kind of the factors that have fueled the growth of the brand and the lessons that maybe retailers and CPG brands that are in the audience listening can apply when competing in these, mature, competitive, highly regulated markets such as the one in which ALP exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think a core tenet of the team, right? Because I think it's been really the team of people that have developed and built this business. But I think the core tenet of the team is you want to try to stay as small as possible and keep an organization as flat and horizontal as possible. I think, in a traditional large company or corporate environment, you basically get paid not to make mistakes, which typically ends up coinciding with not a lot of decisions getting made quickly because they have to go through different channels and committees. Whereas in a startup, if you don't make decisions, you end up losing, right? And so we try to maintain the integrity of that nimbleness and that speed and that innovative personality of our company. And we think that that's really important for any company to maintain. Because I think the classic mistake is once you have success, you scale up. And then that scaling part is what I would say is one of the most underexplored in not really covered process when a company goes from 0 to 1 and then from 1 to infinity. A lot of people don't really put enough attention towards how is this business scaling into itself. And so with like a brand developing and growing as fast as ALP has grown, one of the constant conversations we're having is how do we scale this business as efficiently as possible? Are we making the right hires? What do these people do? Is there a direct need for this person, or are we just saying that because we're underwater? If we are underwater, if someone on the team is underwater, is there a way we can innovate with more efficient technology? Is there a way we can leverage this explosive growth in AI to improve the company's efficiency overall and to minimize the need of what we would classify as administrative work, right? These are things that are at the forefront of every single decision we make every single day. And so I think that's really the focus, of the company. And even right now, at this point in time, ALP only has 18 full-time employees, right? So it's a very efficient business model overall.
Yeah, to your point, as a smaller startup with less than 20 full-time employees, there's less layers of complexity too, right? So you can move nimbly and quickly to react to changes in the market too, as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about strategic partnerships because that's been a key part of the growth story at ALP. You mentioned the relationship with Tucker Carlson. I believe Conor McGregor is also a partner, and that's really kind of taken the place, or not taken the place of, but it's been in complementary, then rather than relying solely on traditional marketing tactics. With that in mind, can you go over a little bit about how you evaluate partnerships as part of the brand building strategy at ALP and what makes them, in your eyes so far, more effective than conventional advertising for the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way we view it is conventional advertising always has a place in business and in the ecosystem. And so it's not that we're dismissive per se of traditional advertising. It's more so that we feel that a core brand ethos for us. Part of what's core to the brand ethos of ALP is kind of, these mavericks, these underdog characters. We think that ALP is a maverick brand, right? A lot of our consumers identify and feel that they resonate with that frequency. And so when we work with a Trax or a Conor McGregor or a Tucker Carlson, we find that these people, they go off the beaten path. And that's part of our core brand value. For us, because it's part of our core brand value, we feel that leveraging, these personalities to expand the brand to people that resonate with that messaging is very valuable. And also candidly, it's kind of the message of the times, right? I think people want to work and buy and consume brands that align with people that align with them. And I think this is a trend we're going to continue seeing, especially in CPG. And so, for us, it's really about finding those personalities that align with our brand message and working with those types of people to expand the brand. And then look, from an efficiency standpoint, what you have is this really interesting paradigm right now where you have platforms like Meta and Google and these big tech companies that have a very algorithmic way of getting you to spend as much money as possible to use their advertising platforms. And so what that inevitably does is it devours, a lot of CPG companies' margins. And, look, these companies are data aggregation machines. And so I don't think it's crazy to assume that they know roughly what a CPG business's margins are and roughly how much they can get us to spend before we basically reach that point of that maximum pain threshold where you're basically putting all of your money as a percentage of net sales towards them as advertising providers. And so we also view working with these different, big personalities as an opportunity to arbitrage that paradigm instead of just feeding it all exclusively to these let's call it these big tech advertising platforms.
Yeah, and one of the things we've talked about has been the growth of ALP domestically. But I believe on the roadmap is expansion into international markets, particularly Europe, in addition to continuing to grow here in the US. As you think about growth and scaling internationally, how do you balance maintaining that consistent brand identity that you've created with also adapting to different retail environments, different consumer preferences, even different regulatory environments as you enter new countries? There's a lot kind of in the mix there. How do you think about that in terms of scaling internationally, Lorenzo?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, our international initiative is kind of like this experiment for us, right? Because the growth and domestically has been fantastic. And so, really part of our focus is, okay, we've got fielded a lot of inquiries from consumers saying, hey, we'd like to try this product. And those consumers are around the world. But a lot of them are concentrated in the EU. And so our focus has been, hey, let's go across the pond. Let's, launch in the UK and in certain markets in the EU. Let's see what that looks like. Let's build out the processes and the systems to figure out, what the most optimized way of relaunching this brand in a new market looks like, right? And so that's really been the focus of the international expansion has been to say, okay, let's get our boots on the ground there. Let's build, a forward operating base in the EU to start and the UK, and let's see how it goes. Right? I think it's just to see kind of what we're really fascinated is to see what kind of cross pollination occurs when we launch in new markets that are where our brand has not yet maybe reached mass appeal.
So maybe I'll close with this, Lorenzo, as we've talked about the growth of ALP many in the audience might be new to the brand or kind of discovering the brand, what would be the messaging you would want to leave to those that are thinking about, trying out what's kind of that core brand message that you want them to kind of take away from this episode?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the core brand message we have for everybody is look, if you are a nicotine user and you're looking for a better time, then ALP is definitely that better time. And we think that we've built a brand that is going to align with consumer values in a much better way. And we're an anti-corporate renegade brand, right? Where the consumers are the decision makers, right? We use them to make the decisions. They tell us where to go and what to do, and we drive that forward, right? And I think, look, I think it shows, right? I think the idea of having these, user built brands, these community driven brands is important. And I think the difference between us and a lot of these other companies is that, our brand was not built by suits in a boardroom. It was built by real consumers. I myself am a consumer, right? Tucker Carlson and his partner, Neil Patel, were all avid users of the product. Everyone at Turning Point Brands, a lot of people there are avid users. So I think, and everybody at ALP, most of us are all ALP users as well. So I think that's the difference, right? Is it's not being kind of created by some random amorphous entity. It's being built and designed by real people who really care about the product and the brand and how to make those products and that brand represent what the community tells us it should represent.
And a better experience for the nicotine user, to your point. I want to take the opportunity to thank Lorenzo De Plano, again, who is the co-founder and CEO of ALP, for joining us on this episode of Total Retail Talks. Thanks for the time today, Lorenzo.
No, thank you. I appreciate it, Joe.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please go to mytotalretail.com/podcast for show notes. Total Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, SiriusXM's Pandora, YouTube, and YouTube Music. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Total Retail Talks.